Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Great America Show. It's great to have you with us on another beautiful day in America. Thanks so much for spending part of your evening, your day with us, or wherever you're joining us from. President Trump continues his quest for Greenland. He's not happy with the good old folks over there. He's also not happy with the Prime Minister of Norway sending a letter to him this week, letting him know that he's coming for Greenland one way or another. He wants it because they cannot protect the territory from Russia or China. And that's the biggest problem with it all. I think it's less about having control of Greenland personally and more about having it away from China and having it away from Russia, who will use it to cause harm on America and the rest of the Western world. And you've got the numbskull over in Canada, Carney, who's doing all he can to coddle up with Xi Jinping and with China because he's all for the one world order. Speaking of the one world order, President Trump is going to be making his return, long-awaited return, to Davos this week to address the globalist elites there, as Klaus Schwab, who's been forced out of the World Economic Forum, will be making his last appearance with President Trump. We all know what happened the last time President Trump was there. It wasn't pretty for the globalists as he looked them right in their eyes and let them know who they really are. Over the weekend, the United States making a big, or rather the State Department, a big move, freezing visas to 75 countries at a, quote, high risk of public benefit usage. You're never going to guess it, but Somalia, one of those countries. The State Department writing on Twitter, quote, the State Department will pause immigration visas and the processing from 75 countries whose migrants take welfare from the American people at unacceptable rates. The freeze will remain active until the U.S. can ensure that new immigrants will not extract wealth from the American people. Absolutely brilliant. Jon Stewart seems to be Americans' favorite comedian, or at least once was, losing touch with society, losing touch with the rest of the world. On his show over the weekend with a tasteless joke, doing the same, the Democrat talking point, comparing President Trump to Adolf Hitler, except with a twist. Let's take a listen to this demonic, twisted human being.
People keep saying, oh, this guy's Hitler. No, he's not. And I'll tell you why he's not. Hitler was popular. This guy's not. Because the people, and I'm talking about people like, I live in a town where like a lot of people went that way. Like they give me a lot of shit in the deli. Like I walk in the deli and there's a lot of like, hey, how's that auto pen? How's Biden's auto pen? I walk in the deli now and they're like, what would you like on your sandwich? Like, it ain't flying in a lot of places where you think it might be flying. So the one institution that I think has been the bulwark in a way that nothing else has been the people.
Yikes. I'm not sure how that plays with the audience saying Hitler's more popular than President Trump. I don't find the comedy in it, but maybe that sick idiot does. I want to bring in our guest today, folks. Great American, great author, brilliant mind on the world stage. Gordon Chang is the author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. I want to take up all that's going on here in America, all that's going on across the borders, and this big fight for Greenland and how it protects America and why the rest of the world is going absolutely berserk over it.
I'm excited to announce that we're having a huge sale on overstock and brand new products. For example, MyPillow Percale bed sheets, every color, every style, every size, only $29.88. Our Percale bed sheets are breathable, cool and crisp, and they're perfect for spring and summer. And check out Rev 7, the next generation of energy drinks. It tastes great, and it gives you energy all day with no jitters and no crashes. Best of all, it's actually good for you. And for a limited time, try our 3-pack absolutely free. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% on our Rev 7 12-packs, or try our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. And our Percale bed sheets, all sizes, only $29.88. Twin size, full size, queen size, king sizes, all $29.88. Inventory is extremely limited at this price, so order now.
Gordon, a delight to have you with us. And folks, as I told you there, Gordon has a brand new book out. We encourage you to go head over to Amazon, wherever you guys get your book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America by the great Gordon Chang. Get your copy, get multiple copies. Gordon, a delight to have you with us back on the Great America Show. It's been too long. Let's not wait this long again. I want to get your take on first President Trump sending this letter to the president, the prime minister rather, overseas about Greenland. And it reads as follows, and it was through his ambassador over to Norway. Dear Ambassador, President Trump has asked for the following message to be shared with your Prime Minister, Jonas Shore, be forwarded to your, and he goes, Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars, plus I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will be always predominant, but now I can only think of what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect the land from Russia or China. And why do they have the right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago, but we had boats landing there also. I've done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do something for the United States of America. The world is not secure unless we have the complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you, President DJT. So there's a lot to break down in there. I want to get your take first on Greenland, as it's a very big strategic location as it pertains to America, Russia, and China. Your thoughts first on America controlling Greenland eventually.
Well, right now, the Chinese and Russians are engaging in increased military activities in the Arctic. And we see this with their joint patrols, Chinese bombers taking off from Russian bases, Chinese submarine patrols under the Arctic. And so something's got to be done. Now, last January, the Danish defense minister admitted that Denmark had neglected the defense of Greenland. And that's clear. And they haven't done very much since then. But we've got to remember that Canada has neglected the defense of its Arctic, and the United States has been asleep too. So, for instance, we don't have icebreakers in the quantity that we need. We don't even have a naval base in Alaska, despite all the Russian activity along our shores. So all of us have been neglectful of something which is now an increasing threat. And the reason is because the Arctic ice cap is receding. It does permit more activity, both military and commercial, up there. The United States needs to have a much bigger military footprint in Greenland. No question about it. NATO wants it. We want it. But we don't need to annex the territory in order to do that. And that has really been the cause of the friction between the United States and NATO. So this has got to be played out. I don't think the United States is going to invade Greenland to take it. But we do need to get on a better page with our allies because we all have a common enemy. That common enemy is China. And we need to deal with it in a joint fashion.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So you'd mentioned that we don't need to annex Greenland in order to control it. But I would ask you, Gordon, if that's the case, then why have we allowed it to get to where it is today? President Trump putting out a tweet last night. NATO has been telling Denmark for 20 years that you have to get Russia threat away from Greenland. Unfortunately, Denmark has been unable to do anything about it. Now is the time it'll be done. President Donald J. Trump. We see, Gordon, in country and continent after continent that China just barges in wherever the hell they want to go. Russia just barges in wherever the hell they want to go. And these nations do absolutely nothing about it. So how do we ensure that that's not the same? Because it's already partially being done in Greenland by China. How do we ensure that it's not a hostile takeover by the Chinese? Because it seems every other world power is more scared of the Chinese and the Russians than they are of Donald Trump.
Well, there is a perception in the United States and elsewhere throughout the West that we're at peace. The Chinese don't believe that. They have a different concept of war. It's unrestricted warfare that comes from that slim volume by 2 Chinese Air Force colonels in 1999. And in that book, they actually talk about bin Laden, who China was supporting at the time, actually hitting the United States. So China's at war with us. And it's up to the president of the United States. If he feels that strongly about Greenland, then he needs to talk to the American people about how we're not at peace, how our society is under attack, and how previous presidents have failed to defend the United States from an obvious threat. Because clearly we've got Chinese agents, operatives, and soldiers on our soil. They are here and they're ready to strike, and we have not done enough to remove them. And by the way, it's not only the Chinese, it's the Russians and the Iranians are here as well in force. So the reason, the answer to your question is, yes, other countries have not been paying attention, but we haven't been paying attention. And we're the leader of the free world. So if we don't speak and act, they're not going to speak and act.
I agree with you 110% about President Trump relaying the message to the American people that the threat is there. I think, Gordon, about 90% of things is messaging, right? And it's how you relay the messaging to the American people. It's why politicians win elections and so on and so forth. I think you're 110% right that if President Trump frames this out correctly and says, listen, you saw what China did with COVID, and you give them a little bit of power and they command the world. You see how China has pushed up on the borders of just about every country to the south of them. This is what they're capable of doing, and this is what they will do. I'm not convinced they'll get the Democrats on board because, I mean, there can be an all-out ground war inside of America, and the Democrats would somehow still find a way to disagree because it's President Trump. The other aspect of this whole thing, Gordon, is NATO, and we constantly hear about NATO, NATO, NATO. I'm convinced, and if you feel otherwise, I welcome your opinion, that NATO has gotten us into more problems over the course of our membership than they've helped us throughout the course of our NATO membership. It seems their hands are in everything. They're supposed to be an organization, Gordon, that promotes world peace. It seems they've done the absolute opposite. You go look at Ukraine and Russia, that thing has been stoked by every single NATO country to continue to fire on it and let this thing to keep on rolling. So they've threatened that NATO, will pull out their full forces. What's your thoughts on as it all pertains to NATO and America and the European Union?
I think NATO has been the most successful alliance in history. Remember, only one country has ever invoked Article 5. That's the article that's when a country believes it's been attacked, demanding the assistance of other countries. We did that. We're the only country to have invoked that. And by the way, Danes have died in Afghanistan for the United States. So let's remember these guys have shed blood for us. With regard to Ukraine, people talk about NATO expansion as provoking Vladimir Putin. Now, even if NATO were evil, Putin had no right to invade Ukraine. But the point is, NATO didn't expand because somebody in Washington or Berlin thought it would be a good idea. NATO expanded because those countries were afraid of Russia and wanted to join NATO and were pressing the United States and others for a very long time, and we resisted. But eventually it became clear that they should become partners in the Atlantic Alliance. We've had general peace in Europe up until 2014. And really that is because NATO has been strong. Now, alliances need to change. There are problems with NATO. But, President Trump has been great for NATO. And just one thing to mention. Mark Rutte, who is the NATO Secretary General, in December said that that NATO was as strong as ever, and that was because of Trump. Trump getting the other countries to agree to 5% spending on their defense establishments. That's 5% of gross domestic product. Only Trump was able to do that. Now, Trump has created a lot of friction in the alliance, but that friction was necessary to get those countries to do that because previous presidents only cajoled, they sweet-talked, and they were completely ineffective in getting the alliance to act. Only Trump was able to do that.
So let me ask you this then, Gordon. How can we consider these people our friends when they're ripping us off for years, and it took Donald Trump to come in to say, listen, you guys got to start paying your part, you guys. And President Trump has talked about this from as far back as 2015, that NATO's ripping us off. The rest of the world is ripping us off, which is all, true. How do we come in here now and say, well, you guys have taken advantage of us because of weak and ineffective leaders, but, we're still your friends?
Well, it's because regardless of friends, regardless of whether they ripped us off or not, the point is that we now face two large states, hostile ones, China and Russia, along with their allies, Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, that are threatening the survival of our societies. So regardless of what happened in the past, we need their help, because although we are by far the strongest nation on earth, we can't do this alone. We need the help of our partners. So just a cold calculation. Now, we can talk about the past, about whether they ripped us off or not. And they did, but we allowed that to happen. And that was actually a matter of conscious American policy, that we decided to give other countries trade advantages because we wanted their help on security matters. So that was a bargain made in D.C., not in Brussels, not in London, not in Paris or Berlin. It was a decision that was made in our country. We can change that decision, but let's not revise history. We did this because of our own calculus of interest.
I agree with you 110%. You look at how, and it's our own politicians, Gordon. I think that's the part that you left out there. You look at how many of these politicians, and I'm not even alleging, Gordon, that they're getting paid off. You can look at their stock portfolios and it tells you everything you need to know. Yeah. Military defense contracts, whether it be Palantir, whether it be General Dynamics, whether it be Boeing, and their portfolios are just loaded and bloated, and nobody says anything about it. It's like the worst kept secret in Washington, D.C. But you're absolutely right. It's our own politicians. It's our own, American people and our presidents. George W. Bush, Barack Hussein Obama, Joe Biden have sold out, and it goes back even further to Bill Clinton, but who have sold out and sold out and sold out. You mentioned Russia. I want to ask you, so in the grand scheme of things, I guess our three biggest problems are Russia, China, and Iran, as you laid out. Do you think Russia's as big of a problem as some people make it as it pertains to America's safety, or is it only China coupled with Russia, or Russia coupled with Iran?
Yeah, that's a great question. Russia really wouldn't be a threat were it not for China, because Russia would not be fighting in Ukraine today without Chinese across-the-board support. And it's not only economic support, because China's been taking Russian energy, but it's also weapons, diplomatic support, propaganda support, intelligence support. So yes, Russia's a threat. It has a larger nuclear arsenal than we do, the largest on Earth. So that makes them a threat. But no, I don't worry about Russia by itself. I worry about Russia being fueled by China. And that's the same for North Korea and Iran. Right. And one of the great things that we're seeing right now is President Trump is taking away China's proxies one by one. Venezuela first, I hope Iran. And what we're going to do, I think, is defang China by going after its weaker partners.
Like who?
Well, first of all, Venezuela. I mean, is clear that this is important because China was getting discounted oil from Venezuela. Now, Venezuela only accounted for 3 to 4% of China's seaborne oil, but the discount was important. Iran's much more important because Iran supplies somewhere between 13 to 25% of China's seaborne oil. And, those Venezuela and Iran were providing oil at heavily discounted prices. And China's factories have become accustomed to cheap energy. Now, I hope that President Trump enforces the Iran oil sanctions. If he does that, then we're in a very good position, because we can, without the use of force, actually defang the Chinese. And that's going to be the task of a generation.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
Let me ask you about India, because India, and it seems President Trump is getting a little annoyed, I guess, with India, because they do a lot of business with Russia. So it's making it hard, I guess, for some sort of peace deal to happen between Russia and Ukraine, because you've got India in here, who are doing everything they can and giving whatever they can. But on the other end, India pretends to be our friend. I don't know if it has to do with the H-1B program and the jobs that they take from American people, but they're doing, I think, a disservice to the rest of the world with what they're doing. And I think President Trump, for the first time in both his administrations, has finally caught on to that.
India is complicated. It, for instance, is buying a lot of Russian oil, and that is keeping Russia in the war in Ukraine. But India also helps us. So, for instance, people worry about the BRICS grouping. Well, the BRICS grouping has been completely ineffectual because of India. India doesn't want that grouping to be used by China as an anti-Western and anti-American organization. So India has basically made that organization ineffectual. So that's good for us. Now, India has a problem with China because they've got the border disputes. Chinese soldiers have been killing Indian soldiers. So we need to work with India, but we also got to recognize, as people do, that India is not the friend that many people thought. But it can be a partner, and we've just got to be good at working with New Delhi. Got to remember one thing, and that is, yeah, we have problems with India, but we got to remember that a lot of those problems are the result of our policies. One of Afghanistan pre-collapse, one of its most important supporters was India. And Biden left India. And what we did when that occurred was we delegitimized all of our friends in the New Delhi policy establishment, because the Russian friends in India were able to say, look, you Americans, you left us hanging. You're unreliable. And yeah, we were unreliable, and we're going to have to pay for that. And so we got problems with India, but let's remember, Biden is responsible for a lot of that, and Trump has got to repair it.
I say this all the time, Gordon. I don't know one country that would trust America. You look at what we've done to the Middle East, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq. I mean, we've torn up the Middle East, and then seemingly we've just disappeared when it came time to come home or do whatever. We've destabilized the entire thing. So I don't know anyone who would trust America to go in and fix anything.
Well, yeah, I can understand that. But remember, Trump's policy in the Middle East has been spectacularly successful.
No, it's not a reflection of President Trump by any stretch of the imagination.
But I think we've done a pretty good job in the Middle East, in the sense that, Afghanistan. I mean, Afghanistan is a really complicated topic, but and that's Central Asia. But if you look at the Middle East itself, President Trump has been able to stabilize the place, especially with his triumphal tour through the 3 Gulf states last May. And of course, in his first term with the Abraham Accords. So, I can understand the criticism. There are a lot of things that America has done in the Middle East and elsewhere that, I'm not very proud of. But in general, the United States has kept the peace and is stabilizing the Middle East as we speak.
Yeah. 100% correctly. And everything I had mentioned to you was obviously President Trump's predecessors, because they're the ones who brought us in. And President Trump's goal was to bring us out. Unfortunately, Joe Biden was the one to bring us out of, you'd mentioned Afghanistan, and we watched the public embarrassment, which, some people speculate is what caused part of the uproar in Russia and Ukraine.
Absolutely. You can trace the failure of the United States, the collapse in August 2021, to the February 2022 invasion of Ukraine. I think that Putin saw that, took the measure of Biden, and said he could get away with it. And we're going to pay for that failure in Afghanistan, because it's not over yet. We've lost a lot of credibility because of the way we left Afghanistan.
Yeah. People complain, that America's, President Trump's doing this global tour around, but a weak American foreign policy, as we see, creates world unrest, which creates unrest for America because it allows China and Russia to thrive in other countries. You had mentioned Venezuela. We watch, the last 6 months. I mean, it's longer than that, but really under the microscope, the last 6 months of all the illegal oil being shipped out of Venezuela. And President Trump says, get the hell out of here. You guys aren't doing this. And he stopped every single ship to go to Iran or wherever the hell else they were sending it. I want to ask you this, Gordon, because
before we leave this, just, people talk about Trump, getting involved in the world and they don't like it. And they say it's not America first.
Well, that's what my next question was.
Yeah, we've got problems in our country because China's networks have been fueling unrest on our college campuses.
Yeah.
And you can trace what's going on in Minneapolis to China. China was very involved in the George Floyd protests. They were involved in the arson in Washington, D.C. at St. John's Church, 1 block from the White House. You had Chinese agents operating and creating and fomenting violence. So, yeah, we've got problems in this country, but if we can defang China, we can solve, and it'd be much easier to solve our problems here because we wouldn't have these Chinese networks creating all of these disturbances here in the United States of America.
So let me ask you that, because, you have people from America First. And I say it too. We voted for President Trump. I don't know who you voted for. I'd hope it's President Trump, but it doesn't matter to me.
I did. Yeah.
But, we voted for President Trump because we have more problems here at home than I think we do anywhere else in the world. And you look at down the list of everything that's gone on in this country, and we still have a lot of problems. President Trump is trying to fix a lot of them, but, that's not something you fix overnight. What do you say to the people who say that? Even myself sometimes, it says, okay, it's time. And I know Lou Dobbs, if he was alive right now, he'd be on the phone with President Trump telling him, all right, Mr. President, it's time to bring it back home now. We've taken care as much on the global stage as we possibly can. I joke with Lou's wife about this, and she goes, yeah, you're absolutely right. He'd be on the phone and say, Mr. President, it's time to bring it back home now. It's time to bring it back home for the American people. And there are a lot of people right now, Gordon, who are very upset, who say, I didn't vote for this. I didn't vote for President Trump to be overseas every other month. I voted for President Trump to fix the problems here at home. Your thoughts?
I don't think you can fix the problems here at home until you fix China. China has been the source of many of the problems here. When you're talking about the economy or you're talking about security, it makes it very, very difficult. If
how
you
do
were
you
to say,
Gordon? President Trump calls Xi his friend.
Yeah, Trump's wrong. Trump is wrong. That is, he is helping to legitimize the Communist Party by saying that. And by the way, Xi Jinping is not President Trump's friend.
No.
Xi Jinping is a Chinese leader. He's like all Chinese leaders, and even more so. He's cold and pragmatic. He's ruthlessly pragmatic. And friendship means nothing. And I don't care if he spent time in Iowa. That means nothing to Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
So we need an American president to do what Ronald Reagan did, to say, look, the Soviet Union is evil. He said it out loud, and he started a chain of events that led to the peaceful end of Soviet communism. We need to do the same thing with China, because China is a bigger threat to the United States today than the Soviet Union was during the Cold War. And that's, President Trump needs to say it.
So let me ask you this, to your thoughts, your grade, your presence on it. Has President Trump began to disseminate and take care of the threat of China in his 1 year in office?
Absolutely. And he doesn't do the rhetorical. He doesn't do the Ronald Reagan thing, which I think he needs to do. But when you look at his policies, they have been going after China hard. Venezuela is a China issue because you have China, Russia, and Iran deeply embedded in South America. And President Trump's policy of ridding foreign influence from the Western Hemisphere is really important. That's great. Iran is a China story. Where I don't give him high marks is Canada. Remember, President Trump, to his great credit, was willing to talk about the Canadian threats to the United States. And they were actually very, very, I wouldn't say dire, but they were threats that are important ones. And previous American presidents wouldn't talk about it. They just let it slide. Trump, to his credit, he talks about it, but he needs to solve the problems, not make them worse. And right now, with Carney siding up to Beijing openly, this is a real problem for us, because whatever you think about Greenland, Greenland's much farther away. We got a very long undefended border with Canada, and things could get really bad if China is even more influential in Ottawa than it is today.
What is Carney's deal? Why is this man? It seems to me, Gordon, this guy's like as anti-American as possible. He'll cozy up to everybody but America. Now, he's got to understand the issues that America has with Canada. We've been ripped off by Canada for years. He has to understand that Donald Trump has a problem with that as a businessman and as the leader of the free world and as the leader of America. Does this man realize what he's getting himself into by getting himself into bed with Xi Jinping?
Probably not. Carney's reacting. First of all, Trump talking about Canada as the 51st state has not been good for the United States.
I think it's satire, Gordon.
Well,
people have to understand who Donald Trump is.
I spend a lot of time in Canada because Lydia, my wife's parents, are here. And I can tell you that there's a lot of anti-Americanism now that there wasn't during the Biden era. And that's because of these 51st state comments. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's satire, but it's had real adverse consequences for the United States. As I said, when you look at what Justin Trudeau, the previous prime minister here, he allowed the Chinese free run of Canada. And American presidents weren't willing to talk about it. Biden wouldn't talk about it. Trump did, and that's great. But as I said, we got to make sure that we make the problem better. And right now, with Carney doing this, and Carney's a globalist. So he is generally not going to favor solutions that we have. But remember, he's also a leader of a democratic state, and he would be responding to pressure from below, which would be very pro-American pressure, if Trump were not doing the things that he's doing. So it's a complicated story, but I think Trump can kiss and make up. And if he can do that, then we're going to be in a much better place, because then we can really talk about Greenland in a way which will enhance the security for not only the United States, but for everybody else as well.
I think Canada's got a bigger problem they got to worry about, and it's the threat of secession. I mean, the hatred, I guess, for Americans from the 51st state comment, but our farmers have been hurt by them too. So you want to look at it that way. We've actually really been hurt, not by just words. And I could say, Gordon, you're not the only family who's been infiltrated by the Canadians. My brother-in-law is from Canada, so but Lydia is far better than my brother-in-law, I have to be honest.
Well, I mean, we have recognized the problems in Canada, but we got to make them better. It's just as simple as that. I'm not pro-Canadian by any means, but we have common interests, and we've got to remember that. And we've got a lot of Chinese and Russian submarines and planes off our border and Canada's border. Remember that big balloon that flew into our country in 2023?
How could I forget?
That entered from a country called Canada.
Yeah. Yep. And we traced it all along. That's a whole nother story. Lou Dobbs was so upset about that. He was even more upset that they spent $250,000 on a Sidewinder missile to take it down.
Well, we could have taken it down, as soon as it entered Alaskan airspace. Yeah. And Dobbs is absolutely right about that. There are a lot of people in the Pentagon that should have been fired, including Mark Milley, who was then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I think the general in charge of NORAD should have been fired. But that is a complicated story.
Yeah, a complicated situation. Gordon, before we wrap up, President Trump is heading back. When you talk about globalist elites, he's heading back to see the globalist elites this week over in Davos. We're going to be talking with Mark Morano. I don't know if you know Mark Morano from ClimateDepot.com. Really, really good. He's going to be on the ground there. We're going to talk to him this week. Last time President Trump was at Davos, he gave them a taste of their own medicine. Let's take a listen.
To embrace the possibilities of tomorrow, we must reject the perennial prophets of doom and their predictions of the apocalypse. They are the heirs of yesterday's foolish fortune tellers, and I have them, and you have them, and we all have them. And they want to see us do badly, but we don't let that happen. They predicted an overpopulation crisis in the 1960s, mass starvation in the 70s, and an end of oil in the 1990s. These alarmists always demand the same thing: absolute power to dominate, transform, and control every aspect of our lives. We will never let radical socialists destroy our economy, wreck our country, or eradicate our liberty. America will always be the proud, strong, and unyielding bastion of freedom.
Gordon, love him or hate him, I love him, and nobody can say he's got a passive-aggressive bone in his body. He's just straight-out aggressive, and he lets everyone know what he's thinking. Your thoughts as President Trump makes his much long-awaited return to Davos as Klaus Schwab is on his way out.
Yeah, Trump 100% on that. Clearly, you've got, well, let's talk about Carney, who in Beijing talked about the New World Order. That phrase is associated with Klaus Schwab.
Yep.
When he talked about this Orwellian sort of international system where there is no democracy, where there's no property rights, where it's just the global elites telling everybody else what to do. And President Trump just absolutely rejects that. He did it at the World Economic Forum, which is the home of all the globalists, and Klaus Schwab, who fortunately has now been removed. But the point is that, it's great that Trump is going into the den, into the lion's den, and telling those guys off. And I just 100% love it.
For people who don't believe the one world order, and you said property rights, and I want to read this today. This has come out because you said about property rights. New York City's Democratic Mayor Zohran Mamdani signals New York City could take over buildings from landlords who repeatedly violate housing laws. So when people talk about the one world order and the globalist elites and these people having this sort of pull on the world, there's nothing hyperbolic about it. This is very real. It's very true. And this is their ultimate objective at the end of the game. At the end game, I said game. It really is a game for these people. This is their ultimate objective. And Mark Carney's buying into it. The European Union, I think for the most part, with the exception of probably 2 or 3 countries, Italy and Hungary off the top of my head, are buying into it. This is really scary, Gordon, because we're going to have another Democrat president, unfortunately, in the near future. This is a scary thought.
It's a really scary thought. And, it's one of those things where, we've educated a generation of Americans who have just, lost all sight of the founding principles of our country. And that's our fault because we let the leftists take control of our schools. And we've got to take that back. This is what Ronald Reagan said, liberty is not transmitted through the bloodstream. And he said, look, you have to fight for it each generation. And what we're seeing in New York and in Minneapolis and in many other cities is exactly that. So, yeah, this is important. Just in general, when you have a lot of peace, people do forget how you got there. And the problem is we have to teach liberty and our founding principles each and every generation, and we failed to do that. So this is on us.
You mentioned Minneapolis. You're absolutely right. The only people who are getting power from these riots and disgusting protests are the wrong kind of people. People out there who are causing destruction, yeah, it's temporary, but it's not moving the needle. ICE is going nowhere. It's giving the power to the wrong people, and they don't understand it. Gordon Chang, you get the last word here, folks. Once again, the book is Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. Wherever you guys get your books, Gordon's Twitter handle, @GordonG.Chang. Gordon, you get the last word here. The floor is yours, whatever you want to say.
Look, we're Americans, and we'll get this right. And we always get this right. It's going to be a close-run thing, but we are the most powerful country in the world. And we're powerful not because of our military or our economy. We're powerful because of our ideals. And we will get through this because of our ideals. But we're going to have to fight for them. And thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you and your audience. Thanks,
Amen.
John.
Gordon G. Chang. I know if Lou Dobbs is missing anybody in heaven right now, it's Gordon Chang. He was one of his favorite people. Gordon, we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thanks so much, John.
Thanks to Gordon Chang, folks, and thank you all for being with us today here on the Great America Show. The book, again, if you want to go purchase it at Amazon, wherever you guys get your books, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America by the great Gordon Chang. Follow him on Twitter at Gordon G. Chang. Please be sure to join us back here tomorrow, folks, for the Great America Show, Truth, Justice, and the American Way. Until then, may God bless you, may God bless America, and may God bless the great Lou Dobbs. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.